Good day, Kevin.
Good day.
So as we review for your first assessment, we're going to post your 1.4 solution. And actually, I think it's already out there now that I look at it. And it's 5 points. And you may run into difficulty, but if you have that OVA file and you're sure that you had a good download, then essentially you're in a good place. Now, I imported, at the last class, I imported the OVA file. And I used, can everybody still see my screen?
No.
Sharing.
No.
No. All right, what's happened? Were you able to see it before?
No, you had stopped sharing.
Oh, I didn't intend to do that. All right. Yeah.
I can see your screen now.
Okay, that's good. So when you run VirtualBox, one of the things you want to do is make sure that when you start it, you select it, then use the right mouse button, and then select Run as Administrator. It just provides more stability and permissions and privileges so that you don't have this. You may recall in our last session, I clicked on Settings, and as I started clicking around the different options, there was an exclamation point that presented with respect to the graphics controller. This may not happen with you, but the default amount of video memory is pretty pitiful. It's only 12 megs or 16 megs, and I slid this over to 128. Another thing you can do before you start it is that once it's installed, if your laptop has ample RAM, so that you have like 12 gigs of RAM, you can get this thing to move very quickly by modifying the RAM available. And I usually like doubling it. So 4096 is a good thing. I don't use a floppy disk, right? So I uncheck that box because I don't want it in the boot order. And I don't want a floppy disk to try to load. And in this case, I'd like it to load faster. Instead of the install media trying to load, or like a DVD disk trying to load, I'm gonna move the hard disk up so that it boots from here, right? I'm also gonna increase the processor CPUs. I have 2 physical cores and 4 logical processors, or hyper-threaded cores. So with virtualization enabled, by the way, if you're having a hard time and you get an error message that it can't run, it could be that you have to turn on virtualization in your BIOS. So what's the BIOS? When you press the power to start your PC or laptop, it's going to go through a post procedure. Post stands for power on self-test. And it's going to check all the hardware components. And then it's going to boot. It'll start reading the disk sectors and load. But inside that startup firmware is an option to enable virtual machines and virtual features. And so what you have to do, there's usually a key press. When you power on the machine, the logo for the brand shows on the display, like HP or Lenovo, or and this is true for any brand. And what will happen, ASUS, right? So those of you that are gamers, and if you press that keystroke on your keyboard while that logo is showing, you can look this up online and Google it, your model number. It gets you into the startup menu. And that allows you to enable virtualization, and that clears the error. But I've got four virtual CPUs, and I'm going to use 2 of them for this machine. So I'm going to increase this. By the way, in BIOS, that feature in the BIOS is often referred to as VT-X or AMD-V. And if I check this box, it means I can run a virtual machine inside my virtual machine. I would not advise that. It's generally not a good idea to do that unless you have a really, really strong thing. Sometimes this setting causes a problem, but in most cases, I like unchecking this. Now, the display, I've already said max it out. And unless you have a multi-monitor PC at home, you might be able to enable 3D acceleration if your your graphics controller supports 3D acceleration. I'm running an Intel processor. It's an i5 and it uses HD graphics. It's got a built-in graphics controller. And if I don't see a warning sign here, the odds are pretty good that I'm going to have better 3D graphics. For storage, this is what I'm supposed to see. And what you want to do is make sure that VBox Guest Additions is showing. Because when you start your virtual machine, there's something I want you to do with the menu to load this as if it were a DVD disc. And that's going to make your machine run a lot smoother. Oftentimes it'll take care of error messages. You may be seeing some error messages when this thing boots up, and this will take care of it. As far as audio, if you want to work media, you can actually stream YouTube videos and do cool stuff and watch your Netflix while you're running your virtual machine. Yes, it works that well. Again, your network adapter should show bridged. If it shows NAT, you need to change it to bridged. However, if you can't connect to the internet, this is the setting you adjust. When you start your PG Book virtual machine, if it's not connecting to the internet for updates, you can change it, and you can do this while it's running, change it to NAT, and that'll often fix the problem, and then you're on the internet. I would not adjust anything else here for serial ports or USB or shared folders. You shouldn't do that, okay? Not right now. We'll talk more about that later. Are there any questions about settings in general for our virtual machine? So I explained that instead of just clicking start, I use the pull down and I select detachable start. This is very important if you're running a laptop, because power save features will kick into gear. Your laptop will start to go to sleep, and it'll put your virtual machine to sleep even if you're doing something. So what am I saying? The virtual machine that's running here is running autonomously and apart from your physical machine over here. So what's going on in here, it doesn't know about this over here, and vice versa. So if you don't use detachable mode, it's possible that you can get strange interactions between your physical machine on the desktop and this machine. Now, you might see some error messages that could come into play, and you'll notice that I clicked off the banners here because I don't want them in there. And if you've done the guest additions install, you're going to get better graphics, but you might have some weirdness with the graphics at first. If you go to the textbook for a gentle introduction, in the appendix at the end, it tells you what the password is to log in. Now, I could put it out here, but hey, if you actually did what you were supposed to do, it says the virtual machine, installing the virtual machine, downloading the virtual machine. When I think it's in this section here, right? Installing the virtual machine, it tells you what the password is in the appendix. All right, so now I have a login, and here's a cool fact that may be helpful if you have limited physical resources on your host machine. You don't have to run this. You don't have to run all these other applications. You can close a bunch of stuff, including the VirtualBox Manager, because that's used to get the machine running, but you don't have to have it running to run your virtual machine. I'm going to maximize the screen, and I'm going to type in my password, and I'm going to hit enter. And in just a minute, after a moment, the screen should come up unless the setting changes I implemented were a problem. This is the opening desktop that you should see. And if you're not connected to the internet, the first thing you ought to do is see if it'll connect to the internet. So the best way to do that is to go to Firefox web browser, right? And just click it open. Everybody knows Firefox, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can everybody see that there's a disk loaded down here? So you should see that there's a disk loaded down here. And if you don't, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's go to Google just to see if Google is pulling. And if you get a Google prompt and you can type in something like kitties, otters, lambs, something benign, and the screen comes up, you know your internet is working. What do you do if it isn't? You go here, go into system settings, go into network. Where is it? Where is it? Network. And then you're probably gonna use the wired setting, because when you create the virtual machine, even if you're using a wireless adapter, it's gonna create a cabled network connection from the inside of your virtual machine to your laptop or your PC. And then how your laptop or PC connects is another matter altogether. So what am I saying? It may not work because you have wired and this is turned off. Just turn it on. It should pull an IP address as if it's another device on your network, okay? Does everybody understand?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So in some cases, when you have problems connecting to the internet with your virtual machine, it could be because your network isn't configured properly. So you click in here, and if you see that the wired connection is turned off, then you just turn it on. And it should pull a network address like your laptop or PC, but it won't be the same as your laptop or PC. So what do I mean specifically about that? If I look at my laptop right now, I'm connected on my Wi-Fi. And my virtual machine thinks that the back end of the internet is just open through my Wi-Fi adapter. It doesn't know my Wi-Fi adapter exists. If I open up a command prompt on my laptop and I just type in ipconfig, it's going to show that I'm sitting on 192.168.1.17 with my laptop as I'm working from my Wi-Fi network service. My virtual machine is connected to that same network like any other device or computer system, and it has its own network address. So I can actually ping it from here unless there's a firewall in there. So if I wanted to, I could like ping 192.168.1.12. Oh, and it works, right? Okay. So my laptop can talk to my virtual machine because it's another computer on my network, right? Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, don't let the fact that it's a wired connection fool you. Make sure it's on. And again, if that doesn't work, then go to the settings and change the network to NAT, okay? All right. Now, what do you do next? What should you do next? I want you to close your browser as long as that's working. And just so happens, I have some of the reading you're supposed to be doing on screen. And it talks about opening a terminal window, right? And one of the things I want you to do is to have some comfort for the terminal window. And it says that there's a terminal icon on the dock, right? And what you want to do is click the terminal icon. So let's talk about this first. You're going to click on the terminal icon. This is the terminal icon. And in just a second, it's going to blink. And if it's working right, what you'll see is the name of the user that's logged in on the name of the machine that's running. Let's say that again. The name of the user logged in is pgbook. And the name of the machine, the virtual machine, it's called pgbook VM for virtual machine. This is not a privileged login because of the dot. All right, so the default is that Linux is secure by default, and that you have to, if you're going to make changes, you have to elevate your privileges. One of the ways to do this is to use the su command, super user command, and then issue a command that you need to run. So what I'd like you to do first, and this is something in your assignment, it says capture a screenshot of each verification, 1 point each, submit a screenshot of the window showing a successful login, right? Now, what I'd actually like you to do is capture this screenshot. I want you to use this command, sudo su, or sudo su, sudo, tomato, sudo su. Can everybody see this? It's asking me for the password for pgbook. I'm going to enter the same password that I used to log in. And now the prompt changes. What this allows me to do is issue commands without having to use elevated privileges each and every time, which kind of gets to be a pain. If I'm doing maintenance, I don't want to have to enter my password all the time to do 16 different commands. It's just easier to get a pound prompt, and then you can do this. I'd like you to get to this point. This is the screen I want you to capture. However, if I hit the print screen key, it's going to behave differently because I'm inside my virtual machine. What I want to do is display my virtual machine in a window by going up here and clicking restore. I can drag it so it's a different size. Oh, isn't that pretty? See how my stuff automatically resizes? And what I want to do is hit the skinny button down here and click on my virtual machine so it's in the foreground, but then I want to click on the desktop in the background. And then I want to use my Windows print screen key to capture my image. Why would I want to do that? Well, it's just a lot easier because now I can crop or clip whatever I need. And I'm using my Windows native ability to capture the entire screen, Now, can you use other methods to capture just the screen and save it within your virtual machine? Or capture it locally to the Windows clipboard? And the short answer is yes, there are other features that you can use using the VirtualBox view options, right? And I think it says take screenshot. Now, when you take a screenshot, what will happen is that it'll take a PNG screenshot and it'll store it on your Windows machine. But if you press the print screen key while your virtual machine is active, it's going to have a different result, and it's going to store it inside the pictures folder inside the virtual machine. And then you have to kind of like, you know, transfer it to your desktop or email it to yourself because you log into Google and your Gmail from within your virtual machine. Oh, by the way, you can do that. You can use Firefox to go to your Gmail and then work from here and email files back and forth to yourself. It's kind of cool. But anyway, what I wanted to do was I wanted you to get, this is the screenshot I wanted you to capture. Any questions about your solution and what you're supposed to do? Now, there's a couple of things you need to do to make sure your virtual machine is running properly and it's stable and it doesn't crash your whole system. And that's a good thing because you use your system, your laptop or your PC for other classes. And if it's going to work reliably, what we want to do is make sure that it's up to date. One of the first things I want you to do is to go to the Devices menu and click the Devices menu, and you'll notice an Insert Guest Edition CD image. You're going to say unable. Well, all right. In your case, it will tell you that it can, or should tell you that it can. It's actually already inserted in here. So if I eject this, there we go. Okay. So in your case, when you go in here and you look in the files on your virtual system, you're not going to see that CD inserted. But if you want to see it, really all you have to do is go to Devices and then insert the Guest Edition CD image. Now, that's really important because when it pops in, it's going to say, hey, it contains software intended to be automatically started. Would you like to run it? You're going to say run. When you say run, it's going to prompt you for a password, which is the same password you used to log in. So everybody got that? You're going to say authenticate.
Yeah, I think I get it.
Yeah. And then it's going to go ahead and it's going to go ahead and update the VirtualBox guest editions. And what that means is that your virtual machine is going to run a lot more reliably after this finishes loading.
That's how like a Mac would do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, in your terminal window, the second thing that I want you to do, and this is something that you do separately because in the next module and then later, you're going to want to try some things that you encounter in the textbook, right? And so you want to be able to do it in your screen using their software. And yeah, you can do it otherwise, but the goal is to get it running. I want you to type in this command, apt-get, and I want you to say update first. So when you're running system upgrades, you performed a series of tasks to upgrade and update your host machine. That's what you did. You updated your Windows. Well, surprise, you got to do the same thing. If you expect your virtual machine to operate flawlessly without trouble while you're following along in the textbook and doing the activities, you're going to want to update this thing so the bugs and kinks get out, so the patches are fixed and the vulnerabilities are closed. And we want to chain that command to a second one. So we're going to use 2 ampersands to execute the first command, and then a similar command called apt-get upgrade. The first command will update the repository, the library of software versions so that you know, so that your system knows what the latest versions are for each of your applications. Then after that's finished running, it's going to separately execute this command. And it's going to do so with administrative privileges or root privileges because you are using the pound prompt, right? And if there are new versions of the stuff that's loaded on your thing, it's going to upgrade them. So you're going to hit enter. And if it's working, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see that it's reading package list, it's getting online, it's getting stuff. And then it's going to execute a whole series of different software packages. It may prompt you and say, do you want to do this? And you have to respond with a Y for yes. Now, in my case, it doesn't do that because I've already done this kind of stuff, right? I've already run this yesterday to make sure it would run correctly. And what you should see is on your machine, it might say 0, 0, and 0 across there. This is normal for me. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the exit command and then exit again. And that's going to close my, it's going to close my terminal. Now, what are some other things you can do to make your life easy? You can right click on this. You can change the, font size and the color in this window in order to be able to work with it more easily, see it more easily, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just press return to close the menu. And I'm also going to go ahead and close this. If I explore a little bit, you can search your computer for, different kinds of things. You can load different software packages. So you don't have to use the base installation as it is. If you wanted to try on some other things you've read about, you have the option to modify or customize this system, which is really convenient. Now, let's talk about your textbook. Okay, so in your textbook, it talks about how to get into the command prompt, and it gives you some descriptions and explanations of the stuff you're looking at, like the tilde, what the tilde means. When you execute commands in the terminal, where you're located makes a huge difference. Let me say that again. Some of the commands, right? Every time you see Unix, you can just say, okay, Ubuntu or Linux. It means the same thing, but we're in a certain place when we're doing these commands. And what often happens is that I'm not in the right place on the computer for the command to run. So it often helps for me to issue the command pwd, which means present working directory. A lot of Linux commands, a lot of scientific computing uses very short, very efficient commands, and it's just in your best interest to learn them. So when you do this, it tells me that I'm in the home directory in the PG book directory. So this is called my home directory, right? Let's go a little further. So yeah, it tells you about this. And then you can generally, you can create other users to work this system. And it's creating other home directories for other users. So what are they trying to say? A lot of times when people are on your machines, you're sharing a machine with others and you have your own login. It's important to understand that they each have different home directories. And that's literally based on the name of their login. So the name of the user account when this appliance loaded was pgbook. And so that's literally where I am inside there. This is much like DOS. So has anybody ever worked in the command prompt?
Yes.
That's good to know. When I say command prompt, I mean this thing. And one thing you'll notice is that this command prompt is not an administrative command prompt. If I want to work in my Windows machine and do something administrative with a command from the terminal or command prompt window, I run as administrator and a little screen pops up and says, are you sure you want to do this? And then what you'll notice is that administrator is up here. It's the same. It's the Windows equivalent of what the hashtag or pound prompt means. So in Linux, if you see a pound prompt or hashtag, it means you have administrative privileges. So half the time something doesn't run, it's because you don't have the right permissions. You're not administrator or you don't have the hashtag, right? The other part of the time it doesn't run is because you're in the wrong part of the computer. You have to be in the same directory where the executable is, or it has to be listed in your system path. That's something we'll talk about in a little while. In any case, if you want to see what's in your directory, here on a Windows machine, you just open up File Explorer and then start looking in directories. You'd say, okay, what's in my documents directory, or what's on my C drive and my temp directory? And if I do this, and I click up here and I use the Control C to copy, and then I go here, I can use the CD and then paste that. And now I'm in the temp directory, and I can use the dir command, and I'll see the same list of files that I see right here. So here I see my first, my second, my third, my first, my second, that kind of thing, okay? In Linux, it's a similar process, right? You can do ls, but there are other switches or options. So if you put a dash AL or HAL, that's really useful. So if I just do ls, it's going to list my files and my directories. The folders or directories correspond to the, so if you see here, Anaconda 3, desktop documents, downloads, you see the same thing here, Anaconda 3, desktop documents, those are the directories. So those that are highlighted in blue are folders or directories. And one difference about Windows versus here, we're using backslashes. In Linux, we're using forward slashes. That's a huge thing, okay? Now, this just gives me a short list, but it doesn't tell me much about it. It doesn't tell me how much is in each directory, right? So I can use the same command by hitting my up arrow key. One of the things that I want you to understand is that students get frustrated in this course because they don't use the computer to their best advantage. If you press the up arrow key, it repeats the command, and then you can just add something extra to it. Or you can start typing a command and hit the tab key, and it'll give you a choice of commands that start like that. So you don't have to type out the whole command. If I do HAL, it's going to give me a listing that's a lot more specific and a lot more meaningful. It'll tell me the permissions for things. It'll tell me which ones are hidden, right? So if something starts with a D, that is a directory, and you'll notice it's highlighted in blue. But if it starts with a dash, that's a file in the directory. This tells me the owner, and this tells me the group. So there's an account that owns it, and there's a group that owns it, and that's what these two separate entries mean. If I don't have execute privileges right here as an owner, I can't execute that file. So a lot of times when things don't run, you don't have the right permissions, okay? So let's review. If I can't run something in my Linux system, it could be that I'm not, and I'm gonna click this again because I want to open up another one. New terminal. So I can have multiple terminals running, they can interact with each other. That's pretty cool. But if I can't run a command, it could be I don't have the right privilege. So what do I do to get the right privilege? Somebody, let's review. What do I do to make this administrative? I want more privilege. What command do I enter? Hello.
I'm trying to think of what to say. You wanted an exit command? No, sorry.
So we're in Linux, and we said earlier that you have to be a super user in order to have elevated privileges. So what command am I gonna use?
Sudo su.
Sudo su is correct, yeah. And when I do, it's gonna prompt me for root password, and I'm gonna put in the root password, and now I have better privileges.
The admin privileges.
Exactly, or root privileges. Notice how it says root, okay? It's changed, and it's showing a pound prompt. That's one reason why commands don't run. Another reason why commands don't run is because I'm in the wrong place. And if I'm trying to run a command, like if I'm trying to run, let's say I have, let's pretend that this isn't a directory, but it's an executable. If I don't have the right permissions to execute it, if that's not turned on, if you don't see an X there, it means if you see a dash, like right here, this is a dash. I don't have the X turned on, but here I have the X turned on, which means that so that the owner of this file or directory, they can execute it, right? They can do things with it. RW means read and write. So those permissions, these are owner permissions, group permissions, and everyone else's permissions. So sometimes, depending on how I'm logged in to a system, I can run it or not run it depending on the permissions. Now that's different than privileges. Permissions are settings that apply to the files or directories. Privileges has to do with what account you're using. Everybody got that straight? Kind of, sort of.
Confused.
Yeah. Now, the other reason that it wouldn't run is because I'm in the wrong directory. Let's pretend I want to go, let's pretend I want to go into the Anaconda 3 directory. Okay, everybody see this? Let's pretend there's a script that needs to run and it's in Anaconda 3. I am sitting inside, oh, come here now. Which directory am I in? Am I in the Anaconda 3 directory? Well, it's showing in my listing and it's showing here. So when it comes to my terminal, if I want to find out if I'm in Anaconda 3, I would use pwd and it would tell me, oh, no, I'm in my home directory. So I want to go into my Anaconda 3 directory. I go into my Anaconda 3 directory by typing in change directory and then Anaconda 3. And now you see it shows tilde / Anaconda 3. Now, what does that mean really? If I do pwd again, it means that I'm inside the Anaconda 3 directory, which is a subdirectory of pgbook, which is a subdirectory of home. Okay. And my prompt tells me, okay, I'm in the Anaconda directory. And that's in my home directory. ~/ means home. And for my login, this is my home directory. So my prompt tells me I'm in Anaconda 3. Now let's list the contents of Anaconda 3. Oh, there's a binary folder. There's a binary directory, right? I can go in there, or maybe there's an Etsy folder, right? Etsy directory. I can do things inside there. I can execute programs inside the bin directory. But if I can't, maybe I need to go inside bin before I can do it. And maybe I need to change the permissions, or maybe I need to change the privileges, okay? Because I'm still sitting on a $sign prompt. I don't have elevated privileges. I'm not root, or maybe I don't have permissions. Maybe the directory itself isn't executable and everything inside is not executable. So these are things that you run across inside your virtual machine, and that is what your textbook takes the time to show you. Now, you may be a computer science major, and you may have had plenty of Linux stuff in other courses. I promise you, if you take the time to go inside here and just read, and follow along, you will learn some of the coolest things you've never even heard of yet. Okay, and then again, you're going to say, okay, Kentop, that's an exaggeration. I knew about this. I knew you could use a question mark for a specific wildcard there, so it would list all of the things in a directory that start with the word file and then end in file.out, files plural with an s, .out, filed.out as in past tense, I filed it, right? Filet.out, FILET.out. That's a wildcard and it's only for that one character, right? And then you can do this for 2 characters, you get the point. Or you can just put an asterisk here and then anything that follows file with a .out is going to work. So you may know some of these things, sure. But I guarantee you're going to find a cooler, easier way to work in Linux by just learning some of these extra tricks and tips. This is one of the most comprehensive and straightforward orientations for Linux just to get a job done that I've seen, right? Now you can get all sorts of specialty textbooks in Linux yourself and you can become a guru in Linux. But if you want good information in a very brief, very quick, easy format, because your time is valuable and you don't want to spend like 2 more years as a senior learning this stuff, take the time to read the assigned sections and chapters. I know that I'm really kind of going out on an edge here. This is a little edgy, the things I'm talking about for computer science people. Now, for those of you in other disciplines, just read the stuff and do what it says, right? As a matter of faith. True story. Every season I have taught this course, some of my computer science majors don't do as well as my other biology majors, chemistry majors, physics majors, process tech majors. Because the ones that are in biology and physics and chemistry, they haven't had very many programming courses. So they just take it for granted and they read this, right? Okay. Very simple, straightforward. We're going to do a lot of this. You need to read this and know this because in the next section, you're going to be doing a lot of it. And I want you to have a background for it. There's a very big difference between a redirect and a redirect that overwrites, right? So one of these creates a file, and if you do the same thing over and over again, it doesn't append to the file. it overwrites the file. That's what this talks about, the difference between those two. You must know the difference. I guarantee you there will be an assessment question about, oh, a student in the scientific computing course needs to capture a listing of directory contents using a simple command from the terminal. And they need to do it at different time intervals, and they need to capture each listing and append it to the end of the file. And they're using this command. But all they get is one listing over and over and over again, and it's only the latest listing and the previous listings aren't there. What's wrong? Well, they're supposed to do this instead of this, right? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Kind of, sort of, maybe. Should I demonstrate?
Yes,
Would that be cool?
Please.
Okay.
please.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So can everybody see my screen? So I'm going to do this. Actually, I'll go ahead and do exactly what it shows in the book. So ALH. Oh, wait a minute. I am doing the same thing. I'm doing HAL instead of ALH. Same difference. Same difference. Okay. And I'm going to redirect that so that it becomes a part of the directory out file. Now, I just did an LS, and these are the files that were in there and directories that were in there. Most of these are directories, but there's one that's a data file. It's called license.txt. Can everybody see that? Watch what happens when I do the LS again. Now I have a directory out file. When I did the listing the first time, it gave me all the directories and a single data file called license.txt. Now that's just to get this on the screen, okay? So I listed the directories and files in there. But then I issued a command. I said, hey, I want you to do a list, and I want you to put this -HAL in there so that it's formatted differently, and I want you to capture it to directory.out. So what happens is that I have this stuff in there, but I have extra detail. Let's look at what's inside there. I'm going to use the cat command to display the contents of directory out. Everybody with me so far? Now, what am I saying? If I open up the text file directory out in a notepad application, if I open up an application over here, I'm going to see this. So this is a text file. It's not a directory. I didn't do a list command. I said, show me what's inside directory out. Now, here's the fun part. When I executed this command, I just created a new file called directory.out. So if I repeat the same command, this time it's going to list directory.out among the contents of this directory because I just created that. Okay. Watch. I'm going to hit my up arrow. I'm going to hit it. Well, I'm going to hit my up arrow twice, 3 times, so I can repeat that command. I'm going to list -HAL. I'm going to capture it to directory out. Now, when I do it this time, directory out already exists. So what's going to be different this time is that you're going to see directory out in the listing, right? Or actually, we saw it right here. Well, that's interesting. But there were 0 bytes in it because it was in the process of running. Watch how it looks differently now. So let's cat this. Oh, no. Okay, I take that back. But let's see what happens if I use the double arrow. So what I want to do is generate a list, but instead of doing a single arrow, see, every time I do this, I'm just overwriting it. Now I'm going to do this. So what I want to do is append the listing to the end of the first directory out. So now I'm going to hit it. Now if I list, now if I display, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do this first. Is it CLS or clear? No, it's clear. Is that cleaner? It's going to give me a better, going to take all the trash off the screen so I can see what's going on a little better. Let's look at the directory.out now. I have two listings because I appended the first listing on top of the second listing. And look, the first directory out that I was generating, while I was running that command, it hadn't posted the listing data to the file directory.out. So it shows directory.out, but it shows that there's 0 data in it. Once I create that file, if I append to it, now look at the file size. Okay, so now I have a second directory listing and it shows this file with more content in it, and I'm looking at the more content. That's what's in there. Okay, well, let's do it again. I'm going to append another listing to the first two listings, and now I'm going to display it. Oh, but I want to clear it because I just want a clean screen. And I'm going to go back and cat it. So now this is cool. The first listing I captured showed there wasn't really anything in directory out yet, but at least the file was created. Then when I ran the second command, it captured some of the content for the second listing and added it to the end of the first one. So now you see that there's some data in that file. It's this much content. If you count the number of characters, it's actually 951 bytes. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Kind of, sort of. I run the command again, and now I'm appending the listing a third time to the first two listings. Look at the size of directory out now. Now, where is directory out? It's in Anaconda 3. If I go into Anaconda 3 and I double click this, it's going to open it up inside a GP edit. That's a text editor, right? So now you see what's inside here. You can scroll down. This is like Notepad, the Linux equivalent of Notepad. All right. So what we've done is explored some of the content of your textbook, and I'm trying to encourage you so that you know that if you do this stuff and you spend a little bit of time, you're going to learn some really cool methods for capturing and then appending and then collecting data. And then it's also going to teach you how to slice and dice that raw data. Well, you might not think that's very powerful, but there's a lot of sensors like Raspberry Pi sensors. So if you have a Raspberry Pi and you have a sensor connected to it and it's building up data files, it's going to create textual and numerical information. And the methods that I'm showing you in Terminal can be used to slice and dice and process the data so that you can import it into a database tool then, or into an Excel spreadsheet, so you can calculate things with that information. Now, where would we like to go next? The last few minutes of class. Are there any questions about what I just showed you with your VirtualBox, PEG book, virtual machine? If you have a Raspberry Pi and you want to do the same things on the Pi, do it. If you have a Mac and you go into the utilities, other stuff, you can go into other and then tools, and then it shows terminal. You can do the same thing in a Mac, and you can follow the same commands, and much of the same stuff will apply. Okay, so the Linux environment is very much like a Mac environment. So if you have a Mac, feel free to do some of the activities that we want you to do and try some of the things that they have in the textbook on your Mac in the terminal for the Mac. But I don't want you to miss the fact that you have a study guide in here, and you should be reading it. If you haven't read into this, there's one thing in particular that I want to keep coming back to, and I'm going to do it over and over and over again during this first module. Everybody see this highlighted thing? It says, explain how best to organize the important criteria required for an SC application. That student learning objective should prompt a very specific question. Where do you start? Where do you begin? And in previous classes, I said it's kind of ironic because when you're stuck and you don't know where to start, where are you supposed to look? Anyone? When you're trying to figure out the criteria you need to do or work with in your scientific computing application, the data, the commands, the stuff, people get stuck. They don't know where to start. Where do you start?
The textbook.
Say again?
You start at the end?
You start at the end. Yes. Who said that?
I did, Keisha.
Keisha. Thank you, Keisha. Now
Dr. Kentop, there's something I wanted to also ask about the research article assignments. Did you have a specific topic in mind, or?
Could be any kind of laboratory science computing challenge, right? So,
Okay.
Yeah, so it's so broad. It's like we have a mix of.
Just wanted to make sure before I went ahead.
Yeah, we have a mix of majors, and so you can imagine that you're working at a research, you're in a research department for a corporation, and you're sitting along your professional peers, right? And who are they? They're physical scientists. They have physics degrees, chemistry degrees, biology degrees, and they're looking to you as a computer science professional. Or if you are one of those biology, chemistry, physics, environmental science professional, right? You're in the environmental science program. You can do your own computing. You don't need a computer science professional to do your own programming and coding. That's what this course is all about. But people get stuck with the basics. It's like, where do you start with the end in mind? What kind of output do you expect? If you're going to be doing something with computing, what's the output you expect? Then you work backwards. What's the processing I need for that output? What are the equations and calculations required? Now, if I know the calculations and equations that are required, what are the inputs I have to provide in order to get the output? Once I know the output I need to answer the question I want, I'm working backwards. And that gets to the IPO. We're going to come back to this over and over and over again because everybody gets stuck. You get out of the class and you get in a real lab and everybody's like, I don't know where to, I had a course in this, but and then somebody like Professor Kentop's going to be walking down the hallway and you're going to hear this thump, thump, thump. And that's going to be me in the hallway banging my head on the brick wall going, we talked about this and it was so simple, but that's what escapes people who are so smart. It's the simple stuff that eludes us Don't let it elude you. Same thing with the variable names. Spend some quality time in section C and D. Read it over and over and over. I'm seriously thinking about changing the way I assess the way students are learning some of the content for this course, because I take this textbook and then I read it and then I distill it and then I summarize it and I put it in a convenient study guide to make it easy, so that all you got to do is read like 3 paragraphs and know them really well. And guess what? Students don't read the 3 paragraphs and know it really well. I'm like, really? You're killing me. Here's C, we spell it out for you. Here's D. This is the piece I want you to know. When you label an input or an output, spend a little time thinking about what kind of data type goes into that variable and what is the purpose of that variable. Variables are like boxes, they're containers. Inputs and outputs are variables. We'll talk about variables next week on Tuesday. We're going to get into the coding part, and we're actually going to use some variables. We're going to write our first programs on Tuesday next week. But I'm hoping you'll spend some quality time reading this stuff. The other thing that I want you to unlearn is that the equal symbol is called the assignment operator. It is not the equal sign you see in chemistry or algebra, mathematical equations. This is a totally different animal in software. It is not the equal sign that means equivalence. It means what's on the right side is actually assigned into the variable on the left. This statement, this programming statement means take this content and stuff it into this input, this output variable. So this is an output variable that puts out this message onto the screen. That's why it's called an output variable as opposed to an input variable. It's very easy to get confused between the inputs and the outputs, right? So what do you need? Where do you start? I need a prompt that tells my user what to do first. That's where I need to start. Well, then what do you do after that? The next step, you know, what do you want them to put in, right? Oh, their registration information. So you got to have separate prompts for each of those, and you have separate variables. Okay. Please do read, and if it doesn't make sense, tell me. I'm stuck. I read this. I don't know what you're talking about here. And if it's not that obvious, then I need to revise my study guide. Okay, so we ran a teeny bit over, but I want to stop because I know some of you have classes that start at 4:30 or you have other things you got to do. For the information we covered today, does anyone have any questions you would like to ask?
Yeah, I have a quick question. All the like meetings and stuff like that, like from even like Tuesday and last week, all those we can find those in Zoom, right? And replay it. Not
Yeah.
Zoom, sorry, Blackboard.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So here, can you see my screen still?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into here in module 1, into the resources folder, into class recordings, into fall 2022, this is, I'll tell you what, I'll put them in reverse order. This is Tuesday's session. Now I noticed here that there's no link, but the other ones from last week have the link. If you give me 1 second, I'll put the link out there. I've recorded it and captured it, but I'll make it a link so that when you click, it starts your YouTube. You'll also see today, I said terminal basics, right? So this was IPO basics. Today's is going to be maintain PG book, terminal basics. That's what you're going to see. 25 August 2022, that'll be at the top of the list, and I'm going to push that out there as soon as we stop. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, I had a question about one thing. For the assignment that was due today at 3, I accidentally clicked draft instead of submitted it. It kind of went over the 3 p.m.
Okay, are we talking about this?
The pictures.
Is it 1.4 you're talking about?
Go up to 1.2.
1.
Yeah, that one.
Here, let's do this. Let's change the due date. And let's make this about Saturday, 11:59 p.m. How's that?
All right, cool. Thank you.
And let's do one more thing. Let's say you already submitted something and oops, now you know better what you're talking about. So you want to resubmit. I'm going to open this up. We'll go to edit. I'm going to change this so that, oh, I already have 2 submissions. Okay. So if I see a first submission and it's only half there, I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to look at the second submission because I'm assuming that people had hiccups or their internet was disrupted or that kind of thing. Okay. So you should be able to resubmit at this time. Great question. Any other questions?
Wait. So that's gonna use up a resubmission?
No, if you want to refine your stuff.
Yeah.
Let's say you were rushed and you know that now you realize after the class, it's like, shoot, some of the stuff I needed to put in there isn't in there. Then just go in and submit again with the revisions in place. And when I go to score this, if I see a first submission that's half-baked and a second submission that's all there, I'm going to blank out the first submission so that you have one whole attempt for your first grade.
Okay.
So basically you don't, I want people to be able to resubmit as needed. This is, if we're learning and we're refining, why should I penalize you? Because, okay, now you know better, right?
Yeah.
So I want to make that easy for you. And that's why I structure this environment the way I do. So
cool.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Now, if you want me to keep what you, like, let's say you submitted half of the assignment in your first submission and the other half in the second, you should send me an email and say, oh, yeah, I was in a hurry and I only got half of it done, but I know the first half is right. And then I submitted the second half. So don't wipe out that first submission.
Got you.
Yeah. Now that's kind of rare. That's kind of rare because usually people don't delete what they have finished. They finish the rest and then resubmit.
Also, I had a quick question about the so I have Kali Linux installed on my Raspberry Pi.
Ooh. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. You can use Kali Linux for all of this.
Yeah, because I enjoy Kali Linux when I used to download it.
Right. Now there may be some scientific applications that are not part of the mix, but you could probably install those with apt-get or with an application utility. You could install the stuff. So you don't you don't have to run pgbook. Now, one thing I would advise, create a pgbook login and log in.
Okay, so go to the site.
Yeah, and why would you do that? Because all of the prompts, the recordings, the step-by-steps, the follow these tasks, watch this YouTube video. See, if you're not logging in pgbook, the directories for your home listings, your paths are all going to be different. So you're going to be like, oh, I'm using my Kali virtual machine, but your login for your Kali is a different home directory. So you're going to have to remember to adapt your commands to track with the differences in the path.
That's very complicated to understand.
Yeah, which is why it's just easier creating a new user called pgbook on your Kali machine and then log in pgbook.
Okay.
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 Yeah, that's much easier.
Also,
Okay.
is there a way to like increase my resolution to the point where it can actually expand to my monitor? Because I'm going under display.
Yeah. Actually, if you do that, insert the device thing, and then you let it load, then you should be able to, when you're
But
logged
this is
in.
not off the Raspberry Pi. I meant this is not off a virtual machine. This is off of my Raspberry Pi itself. Because I'm going into display options and it's not allowing me to like maximize the resolution.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
okay if you.
No, there's a way to do it. I just need to be able to share the screen or something. I'll tell you what, let's stop the share and stop the recording, and let it, unless other students have questions or you'd like to hang out to get some help or assistance with your virtual machine.
Maybe I can actually search it, if anything, because I mean, like, there's always Google.
Yes. However, well, here's what I would recommend. Yeah, search it in Google. But the other thing you can do is you can join the Zoom session and use your smartphone camera to show me the screen, and then we can walk through the options, because there's some quick ways to adjust that. And if your display is capable of higher resolution, your Pi should be pushing it.
I have a 64-bit, so it, and I have a, what's it called? I believe it's a 1080p.
Yeah.
I mean, the resolution says it's 1824 by 984.
Okay. Does anyone have any like class assignment related questions before we stop recording? And then if you hang tight, we'll do this.
Yeah, I'm gonna run Zoom off my phone then.
All right. Hello.